Evening all on PlayChat and YouTube. Okay, hi all. Yep, so we're here for another installment. Magnus Carlsen, I thought to finish off looking at his Blitz tournament where he became the World Blitz chess champion. Some of these games were absolutely amazing in terms of endgame quality, in particular I thought, over the last 2 weeks. Now, there were some grueling rounds actually for Magnus Carlsen from round 15. So, black against Alexander Grischuk in round 15. I hope the board's okay. Should be quite okay on the oh, hi Thomas Villiers, my good friend and colleague from Muswell Hill Chess Club is here. Very, very strong player. So yeah, I think there's a lot to learn positioning about endgames from these. The guerrillas, I wouldn't go out of my way to look at these grueling games, but for these purposes, just to look systematically at each game, I think is sometimes interesting. So Grischuk playing white played d4, so round 15, and Magnus played d5, a solid reply. Knight f3, knight f6, another solid response to knight f3, c4, e6. After knight c3, Magnus plays knight bd7. So this is queen's gambit declined so far. Bishop f4, and I'll just connect to live book to check this position. Usually, apparently, d takes c4 has been played here most frequently, 183 games. Magnus played c6. Supposedly potentially a little bit better for white. e3, that blocks in the bishop though, e3, and now Magnus actually pounces on the f4 bishop in this position. You know, maybe some of us would continue routinely, but knight h5 was played. Knight h5, looking at the bishop. It's after bishop g5 though. We'll put on a Kbitsa here. Stockfish 5 I'm going to be putting on. I think it's dangerous to do something like f6 though. Magnus doesn't go crazy. He plays bishop e7 and we get an exchange of bishops. So bishop d3. This is more harmonious actually with these pawns on dark squares, this light squared bishop. So that f4 bishop wasn't really doing much. It might have been given a pigeonhole if Magnus didn't react though to get it. So here castles, queen c2, and c takes d5, e takes, and you might think, is this going to be a really dull game with castling and maybe a minority attack later? The minority attack aims to sort of inflict structural damage. That would be a classical plan, but actually a bit of excitement now. White lashes out here with g4. So he hasn't castled and he wants to use this g-file. Magnus dare not take this. I think it will be quite, well, immediately h7 is dropping, for example, bishop takes. So he dare not do this, and that's a ready-made open road of attack. So no, he actually just calmly makes sure he can play knight e4 by playing rook e8. So g5 is answerable now with knight e4. Now, I think this would be fine for black knight e4. This didn't happen, so Grischuk just protected his pawn with h3, and we see now knight b6. Okay, so knight b6, white castles, bishop e6, knight g5. Magnus now plays with the that's actually a threat now to take on h7. It's moved forward. Knight takes, queen takes, so white's won that light squared bishop. Bishop f5, queen e7, h4, so it looks a little bit dangerous, but now that e4 square is used, knight e4, and it takes some of the sting out of the attack potential. Bishop takes, d takes. Let's just quickly mention what was white threatening here. What was black threatening? Well, I think g6 was potentially to win that bishop anyway. So, okay, that took that g5, and now keeping things closed with h5. So Magnus has played very solidly with black so far. G6, still trying for an attack. This is ignored knight d5. G takes, queen takes, offering e4, but it looks as though black's up to something naughty here. Is it actually, is e4 really on here? Well, Qxg4 actually did play knight takes at e4. The engine suggestion is actually king b1. And this might be slightly better for white, apparently. It doesn't look a great ambitious line, but knight takes e4 allows this knight b4, so this looks a little bit dangerous with the queen, the only thing protecting e4. And now Qxg4 played knight g5 here, counter-attacking black's queen, and basically it fizzles a bit now with the exchange of queens. Black doesn't really want to play queen takes a2 here. This is bad. Check, and this position would be bad after rook hg1. It doesn't matter about the check here, just king d2. And if the king gets here, let's imagine the king gets here. This is bad news, this position. Say this position here is very bad news, so that's to be avoided. White's got an attack. So no, actually the game carried on peacefully here with the exchange of queens. So knight takes c2, knight takes, and black, desperado tactic, grabs a pawn, f takes, and so we've got this rook and pawn ending, which is about equal here. The engine actually gives almost 0-0-0. Okay, check, and we get this rook and pawn ending, which okay, black's building on e3 in exchange for h5 potentially. Now protects h5. Okay, rook d6, protecting the 7th rank. Rook g4, as though rook e4 might be an option in the future. Rook g2. Okay, a6, so a late minority attack in the endgame is now played at the cost of a pawn to create some structural damage. It also means these pawns might be a bit more mobile if this pawn's taken out here. We've got more mobile pawns in the centre. A takes, c takes, so that happens. Rook b6, so these pawns fractured that late minority attack in the endgame. If white's going to get the pawn back, you might think there might be something in this with these centre pawns. But also this g6 is an issue. Check, check. So a few checks, and then taking here eventually. So allowing this check, check, takes. So black is still equal here, and the game kind of ends peacefully now with the exchange of those two pawns. And so we're just totally in equal position actually, apparently near virtual equality after rook c4, exchange of rooks, and a draw. Not much to be said about that game. It started off very interesting though. You've got to say that Qxg4 did really try and make it quite exciting for a blitz game by lashing out here with g4. It just turns out, you know, black by playing this kind of manner with control of e4 later, and after, you know, getting this diagonal, that was interesting. It was interesting what happened in the game. Okay, let's go on to the next game. So in round 16, Levon Aronian, a very fierce competitor again, and Magnus Black again. In round 16, d4, and we see knight f6, c4, and we see the Queen's Indian territory after knight f3. Recently, if you want to distinguish Bogo Indian after Bogzolobov, I can't say his name, is bishop b4, that's Bogo Indian. But like the Nimzo Indian, black wants to control e4 as quickly as possible. And I just want to test you guys on, do you know what the Queen's Indian is actually then? So it's not bishop b4. Queen's Indian proper is actually just, and let's not test you, sorry, b6, because it's still trying to get influence over this e4 to try and stop white from playing e4. So Queen's Indian territory is b6 actually. Bogo Indian is bishop b4. But this has got more options than just bishop b7. Okay, so g3 is played. Bishop a6, it can torture on this diagonal as well. b3 and now d5. So this bishop is guaranteed a good time sometimes now. So c takes, e takes. So bishop g2, check, disruptive check to cause congestion here. And the bishop just drops back. Both sides castle, knight c3, knight d7, rook e1, rook e8. So another very solid opening choice, very respectable from black. Magnus is not going crazy with weird gambits like some of us do in Blitz. Although there are other players in the tournament I would like to look at actually, the more exciting games, maybe next week, with crazy openings. Because I think the openings for me, you know, if you look at a list of fantastically exciting openings, that really is, for me, that's really interesting that there are some players that came second and third that had very, very exciting games. But, you know, this is solid stuff from black. Queen c2, rook c8, a4, c6. So now maybe actually a5 could be answerable, potentially with b5 actually. c6, so a5, but actually Magnus plays b takes e5, b takes a5, which is interesting. So self-induced structural damage. I think the engine did like b5 a little bit more, or no, it's actually can't make its mind up. Maybe it's like controversial both ways, up and down of both of these moves. So let's follow this. e4 takes, knight takes. So white's got an isolated queen spawn here as well. This blockade square is something to watch out for. Knight f6, queen f5. So this pawn is really targeted. It's going to be one back surely. Rook b8, rook takes a5, and the bishop now drops back, attacking the queen. Queen c2, bishop e6, just counter-attacking here, forgetting about this. And this a7 pawn, that's just taken. Bishop takes b3, queen takes c6. So temporarily in this position, Magnus is a pawn down, but he's got a fantastic blockade square now after bishop d5, queen c1. So has black got adequate compensation? The engine suggests it is slightly equal here. h6 is played, knight h4, getting rid of white's fianchetto bishop might create some weaknesses in the future. Bishop f8, queen c4, looking at f7, but have an exchange of queens here. Queen takes, okay, rook a5. Can black blockade this? Actually, this is kind of interesting. What happens here is, okay, so knight f5 is that black's structural damage after this, knight f5. Black actually played h5 here, giving up that g5 square, and that's immediately used. After knight f5, this is starting to get, you know, it looks as though there's comfortable pressure. So h5, bishop g5, knight e4, check. White, black took that. Now rook e8, bishop c5, knight f6, bishop d6, rook d8, bishop e7. So yeah, structural damage here in return for this pawn to double the pawns, and this seems like a very good deal for white to do this. You know, why not do this? Give up d4 to double the pawns and win h5. And you know, if I asked you objectively, I hope you haven't seen this game, but what do you think about the winning chances here at move 38? Do you think white should be winning this? Because his pawns are all neat. These are just, it's only a pawn up, but you know, what do you think about this position? Do you think you would win it with white or not? If I gave you 20 seconds to evaluate this, would you be confident in winning it? I'll just have a bit of tea while I'm waiting. Okay, Thomas, you say good chances to win. Anyone else? The engine actually gives it as nearly +2, 1.92. I don't know if it's majorly difficult to win this. There's a slight clue though, that the evaluation is not really going up above 1.92. If it's kept remaining a constant, then there might be something which is stopping an increment in advantage actually, if the engine evaluation is stuck. And you know, we're talking depth 48 out of 50 for Stockfish 5. It's saying 1.92. It's not actually going up. So it's looking 48 out of 50. Depth 49. Let's see what happened in the game. So Magnus is keen to avoid the exchange of rooks there, because I think that would simplify White's win. Because basically, if this ever happened, I think the king would just try and do this and win f6. So Black's avoiding the exchange of rooks, and this happens, and we reach this position. Seems very stubborn, and I thought, doesn't the white, when I was looking at this game, doesn't this want to happen? And it does eventually happen, not the first time, but when the king goes back, now it happens that g5 is played. So we reach this position, and now after f takes, and in fact here White actually seems to have a major achievement here soon in basically still avoiding the exchange of rooks here, giving White two pass pawns. So at move 69, would you say this is winning for White? If I gave you 20 seconds here, is this position winning for White? This is the thing, I mean, any thoughts? Do you think it's winning for White? Dashan 13 on Play Chess thinks it's winning for White. It must be winning for White. Anyone else? It's strange. Well, the Stockfish evaluation again, depth 45, doesn't increment. I think this is a good thing if you ever get an adjournment in, say, one of the leagues. If you have adjournments, if you still have those, and you know, engines suggest there's nothing above an evaluation. I think it means something horrible. You know, it's stopping an increment in advantage like perpetual check. So here we have a load of checks coming up. And then we get this position after king g6. A load of checks. More checks. Now, a way for Black to lose is obviously to take here, then h7. No, Magnus doesn't want to do that. He carries on the check. Now a check here, and now rook takes g5, and it's a draw. Yeah. So interesting. And it was a 3 second increment blitz. Yeah, so 3 minutes each with, sorry, 2 second increment or 3 second? I might have been 2 second increments. Okay, so let's look at another game. So a bitterly contested draw there. Now in round 17 against Dreev. Okay, Alexey Dreev. This I thought was quite a cute game in some respects in the endgame. For me, I thought it was quite cute. So Magnus playing white, e4, and we have knight f3, and this line e takes. Looks a little bit It's not symmetrical, thankfully. It looks almost as if it could be not that interesting, but actually, so this is the Corocan D3, 2D3 and C4 variation. So D4, and then immediate knight E5 makes this quite more annoying potentially. This bishop B5. So bishop B5, and white took on D7, and now the bishop drops back, and yes, we get an exchange of queens. So white's got the bishop pair. Okay, knight B3, knight D7, king E2. The king stays in the center. A4. It looks to be useful to fix down the B7 pawn positionally. If black tried to stop this, is it helping? I'm not sure. A5 might be useful anyway. So black just allows that. A5 fixing down B7 for a moment. Now E5, king D2, bishop D6, and black is now threatening knight C4 check with bishop takes F4 check to follow. So bishop G3, check happens anyway, takes, bishop takes, C takes. If let's see in this position, if rook D8, here apparently white can be slightly better with knight C5. So if takes, king C2, you see that these pawns being fixed. It seems as though there's pressure here, which is annoying. So this is avoided. In fact, rook A4, this would be more than annoying. So black actually just took on B3 here. Okay, and now, okay, with rook D8 imminent, bishop C7. Okay, rook, exchange of rooks. So we got another endgame. I think, funny enough, you know, I think we can learn a lot about endgames from these Magnus Carlsen games. So should white have any advantage? What would you say? Do you think white's got an advantage in this sort of position at move 24? Should we try and evaluate this endgame here? Do you think white's better here? What would you say? Would you be confident to try and win this with white from this position? Any thoughts? Yeah, we're going to try and I think training the end game evaluation is interesting with these games. So is white better? Is there enough to win this? Or is black better? Do you think black's better? Any ideas? Yes, play on opposite wings. What do you think white's better? Well, note we've got symmetrical pawns over here. We've got potentially weak pawn here. We have got these pawns kind of fixed. Let's see what happens. F6. Magnus restricts actually the knight. Okay. Now C4 means king C3 to get the pawn potentially. Rook C8, bishop B6, knight E7. Now here, technical point, king c3 runs into knight d5 check, and that might be okay for black, or it still might even be okay for white though. So rook e4 though is played, protecting f4. Rook c6. So again, you know, this check for here if king c3 looks useful. Rook d4. Just want to make sure about that. Yeah, that is right. Okay, so rook d4 is played, and this improves slightly on that scenario because this rook getting to the 7th is important. Knight f5, and in fact now Magnus actually swaps b3 for c4 with this move. So rook takes, so he's got potentially pressure on b7, knight d6, king d3, rook c6. And now this knight again is restricted a little bit with g4. So g6, the bishop drops here, bishop d4. So there might be the idea of rook b6, you'd think. Knight b5, stopping that sort of thing. f5, and White's not worried here about any endgame with rook d6, I think, because here I think rook b4 should be okay at least. But we have g takes f. Okay, g takes. Rook c1. And this pawn looks to be in trouble. These pawns are both targets. Bishop f2 trying to get here. He gets there. Rook f1 attacking that one. King e4. But what if this king could go over here? That would be good, wouldn't it? Rook c1, king d5. I think now it's meant to be equal, absolutely dead equal at move 40 according to Stockfish. Check, though, might have been an inaccuracy. You know, got the force field set up against the king here, and he's just lost that. Maybe this is okay, or this, but this one allows king c5, and now king b6 looks useful. Rook f1, king b6, because if we can get this pawn, we can get this one. So maybe a small mistake from black. Rook takes, king takes, knight d4, hitting the rook. Rook d3, knight e6. And now if takes, then of course there's knight c5 check. So we see b4 protecting the pawn, taking out that. So the king looks like a menace now on b7. An absolute menace. Check though wins the b4 pawn. Okay, so is the king stranded? Bishop d6. Rook d5 to try and build a bridge with rook b5. Rook b5. Rook b6. So now if we can get this kind of scenario, we're going to be queening the pawn. Or like this maybe, to get over like this. King b5. a6. Check. King c4. This means now king d5, so this is the way to go in there. h5, king c6, check. The king is reaching an ideal spot now. Knight e6, a7. It looks pretty terminal. Check. King b8, and here Dreev is forced to resign. Yeah, I don't think he kept the force field up to White's king. Basically, White has now totally won position. So yeah, he resigned there. So a little bit of inaccuracy maybe in this one of these positions here, to try and, you know, here the engine had suggested at move 40 it was about equal. So it's interesting, you know, relentless pressure here against Dreev at 2-6-6-7, even giving up the b pawn later. So that was interesting, I thought. For endgames. Okay, so round 18 against Morozovic. Oh, sorry, Thomas, you got a question. What about rook takes f5? Sorry, I don't know what move actually. Oh, you mean here, rook takes f5? Oh, right. Yeah. This happened, didn't it? Hang on. Bishop g3, rook f1, king e4. Yeah, the engine suggests rook takes f5 is equal here. Or rook a1 is another one, which apparently is okay as well. Yeah, this should be okay as well. Good spot. Yeah, it does seem as though somehow he cracked up here in this position as well by playing rook c1. well, here he starts cracking up basically. Time pressure. It's free. It's Blitz. It's 3 minutes with 2 second increment. So I think black just cracked up there. Yeah. Okay, this wasn't desirable. This position. This is the Blitz. So okay, let's go on to Carlsen against Morozevich. So in round 18, so it's 21 rounds of this Blitz. So in round 18, okay, so Magnus playing white. We have this opening. Symmetrical English. So Rxb bind set up. And yeah, it looks as though white might be threatening something on the c file. Black takes now. Bishop d6, looking at h2, g3, protecting that. And now black lashes out with h5, so a very aggressive idea. Queen d2 now is played, h4, and now g4. So black has creates some weaknesses on the dot squares. Bishop f4, bishop e3. Still, white overall is okay here. Magnus didn't take on c5. I think that would just be helping black this position, because you can imagine pressure down there later. White played king f2. Okay, so bishop c6, bishop e2. And now a5, preventing b4. e5, knight just drops back. Doesn't mind, the time loss is inconsequential, I think, here. A takes. Okay, a pawn sack temporarily to try and punish black. Yeah, these guys are at bay, so now trying to punish black. Knight e7, exchange of rooks. Rook b1, so he's going to get his pawn back. Magnus is going to get his pawn back. Queen a5, and then yes, another exchange of queens. Black castles. Finally, f4. This is quite interesting. Very violent to try and break up these pawns. g5. So leaving white's pawns terribly weak now. After f takes knight g6. Rook b5, bishop c6, rook a5, rook b8. So with rook b3, this could get sort of nasty for white. Knight b5, protecting against that sort of thing. Giving up the e5 pawn. So a bit wretched here. Knight d4. Apparently this is about equal though. So king e3, rook b2. Okay, the knight protects c6. King g6. Some simplification. Knight e5. So okay, rook d2. That's taken. King takes g5. And it doesn't matter about this pawn because this pawn's too dangerous here. So black, I think, cannot afford to take this pawn here. I think just taking and just c5. So black here played knight d7, bishop f3. So it looks as though if given one or two more moves, this might be dangerous. But f5. And we're in actually an equal position here, technically. Knight e5 apparently. Check. c5. Check. So it's going to be winning this pawn. And the king is able to get back over there. And yeah, it's a draw here after bishop g2. They agreed a draw. Yeah, now, but here is where things did start to get really exciting at this part of the tournament, because all these draws weren't very good for Magnus trying to win this tournament. So things in the last few rounds did get exciting. So remember, 21 rounds. This was round 18. So now things get really, you know, he must start winning some games. Okay, so round 19 now. It was against a much weaker opponents than these other guys statistically. Oh no, no, actually not much weaker. 2659 apparently. Ralph Mamedov, pretty decent. So Magnus playing black. Okay, so e4 from Ralph Mamedov, e5, and we have knight c3, knight c6, g3, bishop c5, bishop g2, d6. So it looks like a straightforward, quite simple solution for black in terms of development. Knight ge2, bishop e6, not committing the knight just yet. d3, queen d7, as though there's an interest in bishop h3. Knight d5, tying black to c7. There's no bishop h3 here now. Sorry, knight d5, knight ge7, c3, a6, giving the bishop a return path, which is now used. Bishop a7, d4. Black now just castles here. Bishop e3. Okay, now knight g6, and now h4. So this looks as though white's up to something naughty here to try and maybe, you know, take out f6. f6 though, against that sort of naughtiness, because the rook's now protecting f6. D takes, f takes, bishop takes, knight takes, and now white plays aggressive f4. But it does give up the e5 square. There's a bit of a downside to this. E takes, knight e takes. That e5 square looks a little bit sensitive. Knight takes, knight takes. The knight comes back for that e5 square. But now white lashes out here, and this appears to be a strong move technically. The engine actually does like this next move, which is e5. So what is the problem here that's been set? Well, Magnus played king h8 here. If he plays knight takes e5, do you see the problem with knight takes e5? Does anyone see the problem with knight takes e5 here? What would you play with white? Anyone? What would you play with white here? No, it's not bishop takes b7 dash hound on play chess. It's not this. Any other ideas? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's been mentioned. Knight takes e6 is the problem. We have that horrible thing here, skewing the queen. So yeah, that's to be avoided. And d takes. Again, knight takes e6 is still the same sort of problem. Even if rook takes f1, that's not altering things because of king takes here to leave this bishop d5. So Magnus wisely just played king h8. So it's not the move you really want to do because structurally it looks wretched here now after e takes. We've got this measly, depressing backward pawn now. It's not such a huge advantage for white, though apparently it's about just half a pawn's worth of advantage for white at this stage. So queen d2, bishop c4. Okay, so white's got a nice position. Okay, but what happens? Queen g4, knight e5, and this offers, of course, that b7 pawn, which is taken, and then we see rook f6. So trying to drum up something against the king. There's also g5 possibilities. So for that pawn, is there enough? The bishop drops back, and we see rook df8, rook f1. And now something happens to my brain when I see these positions, because they're quite exciting, I think, queens on and attacking prospects. So what would you play here with black? If you had this position with black, it's time to sort of try and weaken white's king. What would seem logical here? Any ideas? What would you play with black in this position? Anyone? Black's play is interesting. It's practical. It's not like theoretical. Okay, I'll just show you. It's not like I don't think the engine is going to suggest that. The engine is actually suggesting a5 or queen c8. That's how optimistic the engines are. They're just trying to play the best moves, but we want to try and get some chances here. So g5, and one immediate thing about this. I thought it was like okay if white initially white took on g5. Apparently this might actually be okay, even though it seems to invite knight f3 check. This is actually okay for white, believe it or not. Knight f3 check, white could take this and then take here, and we've got 2 pawns for the exchange basically, with the weakened diagonal to black's king. What does actually black play here? This is pretty nasty stuff. You know, if rook here, then even this is very, very strong. Check, bishop g2, and where does the queen go? The queen can't go here because of knight g6 check, winning the queen. The queen would actually be trapped, basically. So this is all pretty dangerous. That actually, it's as if Magnus is saying this is a trap or something. It's not really. It really backfires. Black wasn't really in a position to do this. It's this to do with this. It's to do with this weakened diagonal. It's just no good for black. This position. If rook takes. G takes. This is going to be just much better for white. And we've still got these measly pawns. So, actually, interestingly, this gamble, if it was a calculated gamble, paid off. So bishop h3 wasn't played because it is otherwise trapping the queen. The queen's got no escape squares. But white played h takes g. So now black is actually equal after this. Queen takes. Bishop h3 here. And this is a move Magnus was proud of playing, apparently, in this position. Black to play here did play a kind of cunning trap. With it's getting too complicated really to explain why. So let's have a look at it. Rook h6. So this kind of seems to leave a weakness of the last move, that white can pick up the rook. So it seems tempting now to play knight g6 check, to force queen takes g6 to pick up the rook. Apparently the best move here might be to unpin the bishop with king g2. And now let's unravel the reasons why king g2 is important here. Because in the game, knight g6 check was actually played to try to win the exchange here. So if rook takes, we just first of all take the queen off, and then we just take the exchange, and it's good, very good for white. So queen takes g6, rook takes f8, but in this position, black to play. What does black play? And it guarantees a great advantage for black. So black to play here, what would you play in this position with black? Any thoughts? Have you got to the position yet? Anyone there? Hi. So black's play here. Okay, something is saying knight g4 was mentioned. It's actually queen h5. It actually was played. It hits h3 and also looks at d1. It's a bit annoying. And I don't think this doesn't help this check. Doesn't help white. Say check here. Then we're still left with this fundamental problem of this double attack. So white's actually played queen g2, just dropping the rook, basically. But for a moment it looks dangerous after queen a8 against g8 here. But this is fine. Check, check, and this is actually a forced mate in 11. Check, and white resigned here. It's a forced mate in 10 now. White resigned in this position. Let's have a look. King here. Well, we just win the bishop for a start. Then we could play check here. Then we could play check here. Then we could take this. And you get the picture. It's, you know, at minimum we're protecting. We've got material up. It's a forced mate as well, apparently. Apparently this is a forced mate as well. So okay, so that was pretty cunning stuff. Daring. It does seem concretely this was a very risky idea. Apparently g5. It did actually weaken the diagonal. It just wasn't tapped into with bishop h3, with the idea of sacrificing the exchange. Basically, that would have backfired the entire concept of g5. But it's a blitz game. You hope that some things you can get away with in blitz. But technically it seems bishop h3 is winning. But what was remarkable as well, though, from Magnus Carlsen's perspective, it was a very, very cunning trap. Give him all credit for this amazing idea of giving up this rook here. You know, that's really cool idea that white totally fell into. You know, 2-6-5-9 totally fell into this. But I mean, it's blitz though as well. You've got to factor that in. So check looks attractive to win the exchange. Then queen h5, that double attack is a killer here. So that I thought that was a bit of a fun game. So I told you things liven up now. So this was round 19. So now just 2 rounds to go. Okay, so in round 20, we have a sweet game actually, not too long. So Sergey Yudin, a 2-5-5-9, so he is a bit lower rated than the others. So Sergey against Magnus. Okay, so e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5. So Magnus is playing simple looking openings, no added preservatives or any other stuff. So very, very simple stuff. d3, knight f6, very classical. Knight bd2, d6. So you see that both bishops are out here, control of the center, solid stakeholder in the center. Why not? Doesn't this beat a lot of Sicilian defense positions already? So c3, both sides castle, bishop e6. White doesn't really want to give black dynamic potential on the f file, because you can imagine stuff like this later. I don't think this will give white anything really. Although the engine suggests white slightly better, you could think that this is great potential here. If we tuck away the bishop and stuff like that, then this should be okay for black eventually. This will be a bit of fun down the F file. So anyway, white actually just played bishop b3, and now Magnus actually took on b3, and white played queen takes b3. If he plays knight takes b3, this is okay. h6 maybe, not even bothering about the bishop. This is fine for black. So queen takes. Okay, rook b8, knight c4, and now we see the move queen d7. Okay, so the queen has got this diagonal potentially to start an attack with. Bishop e3, b5, kicking the knight back. Now we see bishop takes e3, f takes. Now knight e7, and here I think white goes a little bit on the crazy side. This apparently was an equal position here at move 14. White goes into a self-destruct here. Remarkable actually, in some respects. White plays knight h4, which does seem to invite this idea now of queen g4 to here. There's to be very annoying tactically for that e3 pawn. Queen g4. Now white should really retract his own move here, apparently. The engine suggests retracting the move here, because otherwise this queen e2 is just a pain, isn't it? Well, white seems to want to test that idea, how painful queen e2 is. He actually carries on with his plan. Another idea might even be this, but then g5, and this is going to be better for black. This is going to be better for black. But yeah, the best move technically is just to put the knight back. Forget this idea of knight f5. But he plays it, and we see just simply knight takes, rook takes, and yeah, queen e2. It's a double attack on d2 and e3, and it is really annoying. And also d3 actually, sorry, what is the queen doing there? It shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be there. So self-inflicted pin now, but maybe white looked at this position and thought Magnus would take on e3. This is at move 17. If black took on e3, this almost justifies white's concepts, I think. King h1, because white could potentially then double on the f file, and you know, maybe there's something in that potentially. If knight g4 here, knight f1, protecting f2. And you know, white could fight on for another day, but black didn't take on e3. Black to play here. Can you guess what Magnus played in this position? So a clue, he didn't take on e3. So what would you play here with black? If I gave you 20 seconds starting from now. And it's the final move of the game actually. Making it a remarkably short game compared to the others actually. That move 17. So black to play. Hope the chat's still working. Oh dear. Okay, hold on a sec. Okay, sorry, it's a couple. So one of you has seen it. Okay, hi there. Back. I'm just seeing the chat is okay. Yeah. So black didn't take on e3. Black just played knight g4. So the threat here is knight takes e3, hitting the queen and g2 to mate here. So that's pretty nice. And white actually resigned here. What can white actually do against this? King h1 certainly does not help the cause here. So what does white do in this position? It's unfortunate. Queen d1 doesn't really help. In fact, black has either takes here is good or just takes here for knight takes e3. That's good enough for a massive advantage. Queen d1 is actually giving us the strongest move, so that's not particularly nice. Yeah, so this was it. Knight g4. We have a short Magnus Carlsen game, shock horror, against the 2559. White had to resign here. This was what can we give up the exchange? Should we try giving up the exchange? Knight it doesn't really bode well to be the exchange down really. We can go back into this pin. Apparently, you know, black's going to play f5 next, and yeah, this would be good. So yeah, knight g4 resigns. So Magnus in the final round now. Could he win his final game against Anton Korobov, a 2680? So round 21, we've reached the end, the final round of the World Blitz Chess Championship against Korobov, d4, and we have an IMSO Indian. Start with now knight f3. So we have a semi-Slav from Korobov, queen c2, b3. I think this might be of a common move here actually. b3 is the most common move in this position. Bishop here. Actually also very popular is bishop b2, e5. Often players with black play just castling here. So maybe there's some bit of controversy around the d pawn being slightly weak. So d takes, we've got this isolated d pawn emerging. Bishop b2, bishop g4. White now takes on e5, takes on g4, plays h3. Now knight e2. So he wants a strong lock on the d4 square, blockading that pawn. Okay, can black generate some piece play or something? Bishop takes down. Now knight d4. So a strong blockade. Knight e4. Queen b2 is played. Black now plays f5. This is quite committal to play f5. It looks tempting to play this. Perhaps the suggestion, the engine suggestion, is to maybe try and keep solid here with rook c5 or b6. Not doing too much. So we can imagine this position, for example, like this, should be okay, should be equal. But no, we see f5. So is black taking a slight risk? It looks very tempting, this f4. But white's advantage technically has gone up after this. Rook ac1, and black continues with his plan by playing f4. And funny enough, again, technically, white's advantage has gone up. Magnus just takes this pawn. So the first thing to note is if queen takes, we have knight e6. And actually, that not only forks here, we've actually also got queen takes g7 as a threat. And if queen f6, we can take here, winning material. Because if rook takes, then there's rook takes here. So this would win the exchange. So that's out of the question to take with the queen for this backfire on the diagonal, knight e6. So black if he plays rook takes, then he just drops this rook. So this whole plan seems not very good. Queen f6. This doesn't seem good to lose the pawn like that. g3. So white just has won a pawn, and now can even use the e file maybe later. h5. Okay, this does seem dangerous for h4. That's stopped. Rook c6. Using the pin at the moment. Magnus just plays rook fd1. Rook fc8. Now takes on c6. Rook takes. Queen e2, threatening not just knight takes, but also this pawn over here. Maybe, I don't know, black was tired from the tournament. He seems to be losing another pawn now. Or is he? If knight c3, this doesn't help because of queen e8 check. And if here, strong is apparently queen e5 in this position. So if it takes like this, and this is better for white apparently. So okay, so queen e2. So we've got the rook attacked, we've got the pawn attacked. Black played rook c3. So another pawn bites the dust. Two pawns up. +3 from an endgame perspective. Black's in a pretty desperate position and decides to go for Magnus's king with knight takes g3. Is this sound? Well, Magnus just takes this. Rook takes g3. So safety points to note here. I think king h2 must lose here potentially, or equal. No, it's equal. Rook queen takes f4 is no good for white. This position is no good for white. There's too many threats. Or like this, it's too much. So Magnus has to go here. This is the most accurate move. King f2. Queen takes f4 check is played. Knight f3. So one question here is g6 possible? Let's have a quick look. g6 no. Queen takes d5 check. So that doesn't help. Black is in trouble here actually. White is threatening this anyway. So rook h3 was played, allowing queen takes d5 check. Although black does seem to be threatening rook h2 potentially. But here queen goes back to h5. Because this is pretty nasty now. This rook d8. If king g8, then rook d8. Otherwise white's just a piece up. So Korobov had to resign in this position. So that just shows that you know, doesn't this look fun for black, this idea of playing f5 f4? Thomas, yeah, recognize this sort of pattern? You see, you go for the king, you just weaken your own king. Thomas, yeah? Isn't that a really bad one to sort of make a note of? It's just a way of losing two pawns for nothing, the way black played it. Another weak pawn. All these pawns are just weaknesses. Fixing the weakness. Yeah? This is no good. This second sunt is no good either. This just loses another pawn. So, I know black was embarrassed in this game and he was forced into this desperate piece sack, and Magnus just played like a computer after that with king f2, consolidating. Okay, so so with that game, Magnus became the World FIDE Blitz champion. So we've looked at the last 20, we've looked at 21 games in the last 3 weeks. So this will go on YouTube. So comments and questions on YouTube, and okay, I think there's a good football match on soon. So we'll leave it there. Thanks very much. See you next week at the same time. Comments or questions on YouTube. Okay, until later.